What's up, TUMNAD Lectures? In today's video, we're going to be looking at what we call the billiard system. If you find it helpful at the end of it all, please make sure you like the video, comment down in the comment section, and subscribe. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, we're going to be following these kind of objectives. We're going to be looking at the organs or the structures that make up the billiard system. We'll look at the main function and even also the bioflow. Okay? So now, our first thing first, we need to first understand what's going to be the billiard system now. The biliary system is going to be that system of the body which is going to be having a couple of different organs, different structures that are connected together by what we call the ducts. And the main essence of this biliary system is going to be synthesis of bile, storage of bile, concentration of bile, and transport of the bile. You should not forget that it's going to be also pancreatic digestive juice, which is also going to be part of the biliary system. Okay? So now we have a couple of different organs, different structures that are going to be part of what we call the biliary system. And the first one is what we call the liver, okay? Now, the liver is going to be aiding in synthesis of what we call bile, by what we call the hepatocytes. So now, the liver is going to be aiding in bile, in what we call bile synthesis, okay? What we call bile synthesis. So now, the liver is going to be making what we call the bile. So now the second one is going to be what we call the gallbladder. Okay, what we call the gallbladder. And of course, the gallbladder is going to be aiming at what we call storage and concentration of bile. Okay, so now the gallbladder is going to be for storage. It's going to be for what we call storage and concentration. Okay, storage and concentration of bile. Okay, so now that is its main primary role. Okay, and then the third component of the biliary system is going to be the bile ducts. Okay, it's going to be what we call the bile ducts. We're going to be having a couple of different bile ducts that are going to be coming together to connect these structures, and the main function of these ducts are going to be for transport of bile. Okay, so now these ones are going to be for transport of bile. They are going to be those are the canal, those are the tubes through which the bile is going to be flowing. And then again, another important structure is going to be what we call the pancreas. Okay, is what we call the pancreas. And of course, the pancreas is going to be giving us enzymes, which we call the pancreatic digestive enzymes. Okay, so now the pancreas is going to be giving us what we call pancreatic digestive enzymes, and we have a couple of them that are going to be digesting all the food nutrients. Okay, and then the last one, which is some people don't consider to be part of the biliary system, but is also super very important, is the small intestine, particularly the duodenum. Okay, so now the fifth one is going to be what we call the duodenum. And of course, the duodenum, he is the one going to be receiving what we call the bile and even also the enzymes. So now, for that reason, the duodenum is going to be like a receiver. Okay, it's going to be a receiver of bile. It's going to be a receiver of bile and even also what we call pancreatic digestive enzymes. So now these are the five structures that really make what we call the biliary system. The liver, the gallbladder, the bile ducts, the pancreas, and even also the duodenum. So now, having seen the structures that really make what we call the biliary system, let's go ahead and connect the biliary system, and then we see it anatomically. How do we call all those structures that are really going to be making what we call the biliary system? Okay. Now, looking at what we call the anatomy of the biliary system. This diagram illustrates the anatomy of the biliary system. Now, we are going to be labeling them according to the numbers from number 1 up to number 14. Now, number 1, this number 1 here, the whole of this structure here, the whole of this red structure here is the liver. Of course, the liver is going to be having different parts or different lobes. So now, this one here, number 1, is going to be what we call the right lobe. Okay? So now, this number 1 here is going to be what we call the right lobe. Super very important. And then of course this second one is going to be now the other smaller lobe, which is seen on the anterior view. You know how it is called? This second one is what we call the left lobe. Okay, Now, when we come to number 3, we have this duct, which is going to be coming from what we call the left lobe. You know how this duct is called? This duct here is what we call the left hepatic duct. Okay, so now this one here is what we call the left hepatic duct. It is going to be allowing the flow of bile. Okay, and then when we come to here to this number 4 coming from the right lobe, this duct here, super very important, is what we call the right hepatic duct. Okay, is what we call the right hepatic duct. Super very important. Now, when the left hepatic duct and then the right hepatic duct, when they come together, they make this duct number 5. You know how this duct is called? This duct here is what we call the common hepatic duct. Okay, is what we call the common hepatic duct. That's the union of the left and then the right hepatic duct. Okay. Then when we come to number 6, this green structure, super very important for storage and concentration of bile. You know how he's called? This structure here, number 6, is what we call the gallbladder. Super very important. Okay. And then number 7 is going to be that duct that allows the movement of the bile from the gallbladder to meet this another duct. You know how this duct that connects to what we call the common hepatic duct? This duct here is what we call the cystic duct. It is the one which allows the bile to move from the gallbladder to come and join into this another duct. Okay. Now, how about this number 8 here? This number 8, which is going to be a union of what we call the cystic duct and then the common hepatic duct. Together, they make this long duct. You know how this duct is called? This duct here, number 8, is what we call the common bile duct. Super very important. Okay. Then when we come to number 9, the whole of this leaf-like structure, super very important, the production of enzyme. You know how the whole of this structure is called? Structure here is what we call the pancreas. Okay, this structure here is what we call the pancreas. Super very important. Then when you come to the center part of the pancreas, it's going to be having this center tube. You know how this center tube is called? This is going to be what we call the main pancreatic duct. Okay, is what we call the main pancreatic duct. Super very important in transporting different secretions containing pancreatic digestive juice. Okay. Then you have this tube here, number 11, which is going to be a union of the main pancreatic duct and then the common bile duct. This structure here is what we call the ampulla of Vater, or even what we call the hepatopancreatic duct. Okay, so it can also be called hepatopancreatic ampulla. Okay, hepatopancreatic ampulla, or what we call the ampulla of Vater. That's number 11. Now, when we come to number 12 here, this is going to be now one of the most super important regulator of all the secretions coming from what we call the biliary system. He is going to be a regulator. You know how he's called? This structure here, super very important, is what we call the sphincter of Oddi. Okay, so number 12 is what we call the sphincter. Of Oddi. Super very important regulator of pancreatic and even also the bile flow into this structure here, which we shall look up about later. Okay. Then when we come to number 13 here, this structure here is super very important, a branch of the main pancreatic duct. You know how he's called? He is called the accessory pancreatic duct. Okay, is what we call the accessory pancreatic duct. Some people do contain the accessory pancreatic duct, which can also drain what we call the pancreatic juice direct into this structure number 14. You know how this structure number 14 is called? This structure number 14 is going to be part of the small intestine, the first segment of the small intestine. You know how it's called? This structure here, which is going to be housing the head of the pancreas, is just what we call the duodenum. Okay, is what we call the what we call the duodenum. Okay, so now this briefly covers the really anatomy, all the structures that make what we call the biliary system. Okay, so now in the next video, we are now going to be focusing on the flow of bile. How is the bile going to be moving through all these ducts until it falls into what we call the duodenum? Okay, that's going to be our main focus in the next video, which is going to be part 2. So now, TUMNAD, I have talked a lot of things, and if you think whatever I've talked is making sense, is adding to you, you're benefiting, please, you can support me, and that one can be done by a couple of means. You like the video, comment down the comment section, and share this video to someone else whom you think that this video is so much important. And of course, don't forget to subscribe at the end of it all. Thank you very much for watching TUMNAD, as always, until we meet next time.